CFR. Chukwuma Soludo, CFR, holds a BSc Economics First Class Honors, and MSc PhD Economics, winning departmental, faculty, and university prizes as the best graduating student from University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He has received over a dozen short and medium-term courses and fellowships, including at the universities of Cambridge, Oxford, and Warwick, the Brookings Institution, Washington, and the United Nations. Soludo was promoted Professor of Economics at the age of 38, 26 years ago, as well as visiting professor. Yes, please applaud that. At 36, some of us were still. He was also visiting professor at Swarthmore, USA, and has over 200 publications to his credit. Before joining government in 2003, Professor Soludo had lived and traveled to 45 countries as an itinerant scholar and consultant to 21 international financial and development institutions, including the World Bank, the IMF, AFDB, EU, USAID, UK, DFID, UNCTAD, UNDP, to mention a few. Professor Soludo had been called upon to serve the nation in various capacities. In 2003, he was Chief Economic Advisor to President Obasanjo, as well as Deputy Chairman and CEO of the National Planning Commission. He later served as the Central Bank Governor, Chairman of the Board of Nigerian Security Printing and Minting Company, PLC. He was also the co-founder and founding chairman of Africa Finance Corporation. His distinguished national service, especially the transformation of the banking and financial system, earned Soludo over 160 national and international awards, including being the triple winner of African and Global Best Governor of Central Banks for 2005, 2006, and 2007, by the London Financial Times Banker magazine and Euromoney. In gratitude for his service, he was honored with the third highest national honor, Commander of the Order of the Federal Republic, in 2006. Since 2022, Professor Soludo has been governor of Anambra State, where in 2 years, without borrowing, he is proven to be a game changer and winning multiple laurels, including being the 2023 Governor of the Year on Infrastructure and Rural Development. The world knew Professor Soludo as Mr. Transformation. In Anambra, they say, the solution is here. Please join me as we honor the presence of His Excellency, Professor Charles Chukwuma Soludo, as he joins us at the platform today.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. Your Excellencies, the Speaker, former Governor, my Lord Bishop, if I err here, I will confess afterwards. It's really a great pleasure to be here, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think after listening to the erudite scholars and statesmen a few minutes ago, in the last 2 hours or so, I don't really know what else to say or why I am here. I am supposed to be the one in government. As I looked around, I'm looking forward to finishing here and going back to my senior brother in this business, Governor Fashola, from whom I've been taking some useful notes. I will come back for my tutorials. I thought I was just coming here to just take notes and go away. But here I am, and as I was scribbling, just like Dogara, the notes yesterday, I told Pastor that last night when I came in, I was still busy even till a few minutes before coming here. They got to print it out for me, that I was still scribbling, and that I was going to stick to the script. So I don't see any headlines, Soludo said. So I will be able, even though it's still a zero draft, I can circulate it that way, at least quote what I have said. So I want to join all of you in saying Happy Democracy Day. Whatever, however it is and whatever, we'll still say, in all things, give thanks to God. So, and I commend Pastor Boju Yamade and the convener of this platform. You're really doing a very immense historic civic duty to Nigeria by having this platform. I'm happy to be here again after 5 years. And I would, in my remarks, which is written because I have limited time, I will just skip quite a few of areas because a lot of them have been covered. But just as I listen to all of this, and that's why I have the theme for this, 25 years uninterrupted democracy, 64 years of independence in October. In 2005, I delivered the Democracy Day lecture organized by the federal government of Nigeria. And the title then was The Political Economy of Sustainable Democracy in Nigeria. And today, 20 years on, I am here on another Democracy Day lecture to discuss democracy and free markets. And as I perused through that lecture, I came with it at the aircraft as I was coming in yesterday. I was perusing through that lecture I gave 20 years ago. I was really saddened by the fact that the key theses and recommendations of that lecture are even more relevant and urgent today. Over those past 20 years, in my view, we have made so much efforts, but still largely going in circles as a nation. In the brief remarks that I will make, I will argue that, yes, I've had all the arguments about democracy, free markets, whether there is, it's a spectrum. It's all work in progress everywhere in the world. But I will argue that democracy and free market, we need them as two sides of a vehicle for maximizing liberty, freedom, security, prosperity, and happiness of citizens. Neither democracy nor free market will endure if they don't deliver these objectives. So we will argue further that our democracy faces an existential threat of a potentially unsustainable economy. And we, all Nigerians, must brace up to save and sustain it. But before I even go much further, I need to put a little disclaimer. I have to remind myself that I am here as a serving state governor, and therefore part of the governing elite. We are the ones who are, especially at a time when governors have become the easy scapegoats for everything wrong in Nigeria. I will then, by association, also take responsibility. It's not a good time to be a governor in Nigeria. I know that many of us actually who love this country to death, working day, having sleepless nights, trying to fix it within the perimeters of the boundaries permissible by the structure and the system and resources available to us. But here not to offer excuses or defense. Besides, I'm not here also to offer a treatise on what we must do to get Nigeria going. I think after listening to all the presentations, we'll just carry all of them and then send it there. I have access to them there. And sometimes I have to remind them myself that I am part of them, that they have to tell. Say, okay, let's go and tell them. And they have to tell you again, but you are part of them. So being part of them, I have to be measured in what I can say publicly in terms of advice. You don't advise. I won't advise on the podium. I don't have that liberty anymore because I have access to share my thoughts in-house. So, and I'm calling on, doing my citizen duty to call on all of us as citizens to rise up to the occasion, because the challenges we face are obviously too big to be left to politicians alone. And I think that was your point about participation. We all have the responsibility. I have a section here that deals with the relationship between democracy and free economy and all of that. I won't waste your time on all of those and so on. But just to make the point that at the end of the day, they're all spectrum, whether democracy, free markets, there's none. There's no place in the world where you have any of the extremes, the textbook extremes. We are somewhere in the spectrum. But I want to share with you a thought about the correlation between democracy, the sustainability of democracy, and the economic conditions of a society. And I want you to pay attention to this. I am quoting a 1996 study published in the Journal of Democracy about the strength of economy and the sustainability of democracy. It's very important as Nigerians that we pay attention to this. Quote, once a country has a democratic regime, its level of economic development has a very strong effect on the probability that democracy will survive. Democracy can be expected to last an average of about 8.5 years in a country with per capita income under $1,000 per annum. 16 years in one with income between 1,000 and 2,000. 33 years between 2,000 and 4,000, and 100 years between 4,000 and 6,000. Above 6,000, democracies are impregnable and can be expected to live forever. And it asserts that no democratic system has fallen in a country where per capita income exceeds $6,055. End of quote. Fellow Nigerians, the above quote should make each one of us to pause and ponder. Between 1,000 and 2,000, democracy is expected. Some years ago, per capita income in Nigeria had risen to over 2,500, even 3,200. We were then on the path to that sustainable path where you'll expect it to live 3,300 years and so on. But bingo, something has happened over the last 10 years. There is compression of our national income. We are now at about 50% of where it was 2014. And per capita population ballooning and per capita income is now at about 1,200. Per capita income is now compressed again back to about 1,200. And therefore, yes, that empirical evidence might not be destiny, but if the correlation is as strong as stated above, then its predictive power implies that with Nigeria's current per capita income of about 1,200, then the sustainability of democracy in Nigeria will require an extraordinary effort. Something just to get us to think. I've written quite about this, but if you look at our checkered history, I will just take you we can spend the whole day talking about where we are and how we got here. But there's no space to do that. But our checkered history so far makes me to conclude that we have made so much progress while still standing still. Made so much progress, but literally seem to still be standing stress. And let me admit the fact that it's not so many of us Nigerians don't appreciate. Nigeria is a very poor country, and its public finance is broken. We're a very poor country. I've just said about the per capita income, 1,200. We are in the lower rung of the low middle income countries. We are back there. We were escalating, but we are back. But I will say a few things. Space and time won't allow us to provide all the details. For over the last 50 years, especially since the first oil boom, when this country we have much of our economic management has been responding to the volatility in the oil sector. If at any point we can artificially keep the exchange rate, as low as we want, we can fix it to 1 naira to $1 artificially today, and bingo, you'll be the richest economy in the world in dollar terms. But does that make any sense? I like your treatise, Mr. Speaker, as I was telling you a moment ago. Very interesting. I wish we could have time to discuss that, but I just whispered to him that part of what happened when I was governor of Central Bank, I'm the governor and one who served as governor of Central Bank when exchange rate moved down from about 138 until 112 to the dollar. And we built foreign reserve from 10 billion to all-time 63 billion. And with the stable and so on and so forth. But one thing we didn't do, we didn't print trillions of naira and poured it in there. Indeed, there was a particular incident when the federal government wanted to borrow, take ways and means from central bank. And the law allows the governor to fix the interest rate. And I charged them a penal rate and took our own interest up front. Because the law requires us to give them if they needed it, but it must not exceed 5% of the previous year's actual revenue of the federal government. And they must pay it back by the 31st of December. Otherwise, central bank is forbidden by law from extending further ways and means to the federal government. That's the law. It's still the law. The 2007 CBN Act. But here we were. We printed, if we obeyed that law, there should have been no time when ways and means advances to the federal government should have exceeded more than 250, 300 billion. But we kept printing. We printed the first 1 trillion. The federal government didn't pay. We printed the second. 5, 10, 20, 22. Printed money backed by nothing and put into the system, and we expect the exchange rate to remain the same when you are exporting nothing. We expect inflation to remain the same when you are having nothing. We expect this. Gentlemen, you can't pour a drum of water on a rug and expect it to remain dry. We must get down. But I don't have time to get onto all of this. But all I have said, but let me say this. For me personally, on this kind of platform, I remember in the run-up to 2015 presidential election, I wrote a piece entitled Buhari versus Jonathan, Beyond the Elections. It made generated quite a lot of noise. I think I will now restrain from writing these things in the run-up to presidential elections. Now, but one of the things I said there was that any of them that won that presidential election, it was going to be a Pyrrhic victory. Because I warned that the public finance was broken and that the economy was latently and structurally in avoidable crisis. The last administration, of course, won by President Buhari then, chose to play safe with the populist politics, with the economy, I would say against some advice, by illegally printing the more than 22 trillion that I just said, and amassing public debt at its only way to stay afloat, and keeping the illusion of these phantom subsidies on petrol, forex, and electricity. Now the chicken has come home to roost, And Nigeria is paying the very high cost of delayed adjustment with escalating inflation, unsustainable debt service payments, depreciating exchange rate, rising interest rates and poverty and unemployment, a largely insolvent public finance, and compressed GDP in dollar terms. As your prices rise and the exchange rate adjusts, you're exporting nothing. Where's your foreign exchange? You have a reserves of about 30 or thereabout billion, and you have money supply almost getting to 100 trillion. You do the maths. Our population is growing, while insecurity threatens food security. Today, the once largest economy in Africa is now the fourth, with the dollar GDP lower than in 2010, or less than 50% where we were in 2014. While per capita income is now about 1,200, down from some over 2,500 some years ago. And all I want to say is that we have had a roller coaster of a journey. And let me repeat this point. The size of government, and that is its revenue and expenditure, is too minuscule to move the needle. And the so-called increased revenue due to subsidy removal is nothing but money illusion. It's money illusion. And I think that point was made by Bishop when he said we got to realize that government just can't do it. And I just want to send this message that the government is too small. Just too small. And I want to share some numbers with us, because when I have some conversations, unfortunately, there are things I can now get out. I have to be reminded again, you are a state governor, so sit down. I can't get out now. So I actually resist engaging in these public debates or discussions about public policy. All the invitations by the televisions and so on, join this show or join the other show, I remind them that, no, I am part of them, so you people tell us. Consider the 2024 budget of the federal government. Just use it as an example. 28.7 trillion with projected revenue of about 18.3 trillion. And borrowing that will be about 10.4 trillion. This is just about, if you take the exchange rate, approximately 1,500, of about just 20 billion US dollars, or 7% of our GDP. Check out global averages. Other countries around, even in Africa, their budgets as percentage of GDP of that country. 7%, one of the lowest in the world. For a country of about 230 million people, or our budget of about $83 per person per year. Approximately $6.9 per Nigerian per month. Compared to Kenya's 2024 budget of about 31 billion, ours is about 20 for 230 million people. Kenya's is about 31 billion for 54 million people. Kenya, I'm not talking about US, so don't give all this, Kenya. Or about $574 per person. Even this 28.7 trillion is largely unrealistic, as it will take a miracle to realize the projected 18.3 trillion if current trends persist. If current trends, my estimate is that they'll probably, at best, get 17 trillion. And from where will it borrow for 10.4 trillion with the current state of the money and capital markets? Even at that, the understated debt and non-debt recurrent expenditure totals about 18.1 trillion, meaning that at best, the federal government will still borrow to fund recurrent expenditure. At best, it will still have to borrow some money, even if it spends zero on capital. And I will tell you, that best estimate of mine, if current trends, unless something magical happens with the revenue profile, that 17 trillion will amount to 6,160 naira per Nigerian per month. That is, even if it were to bring all its revenue with the quantum the so-called revenue that boom, and put it on the table and share it to all Nigerians, everybody will get 6,160 per month. But it is from this 6,160 per person per month that it will have to pay the about 8.25 trillion as debt service. It will have to do the recurrent, including salaries, of about 9.92 trillion. My dear brothers, even the entire capital, if they were to have it, a miracle were to, because every penny of capital to be spent will have to be borrowed. And the government has been doing this since 2010. Since 2010, the debt service and non-debt service recurrent expenditure of the federal government combined have consistently exceeded the current revenue, meaning that every penny is spent on building 1 square inch of road or whatever capital was borrowed for the past 14 years or so. We need to understand where we are. Even if it were to get the entire capital to spend, it's barely 2% of GDP. And I want to say that to move this economy at the pace that we expect it to move, the consolidated public sector capital spending, consolidated public sector, I mean states and federal government combined, should be between maybe 10 to 15% of GDP. Currently, both of them combined, it's less than 5% of GDP. And this to be borrowed. So, some of us, I see some people shaking their head here. I don't mean to make you depress you. But even look at the quantum, because everybody I hear it always, oh, they remove subsidy and the government is getting revenue and so on. And it's just nothing but money illusion. Money is what money can buy. As governor of Central Bank, I saw the exchange rate, like I said, at about 138, and I saw it coming down. At a point, it was 118 before it even got down to 112 at some point. At the time that it was 118, I know a state that was receiving about 5 billion per month, average, from FAC. That 5 billion then was an equivalent of $42.4 million every month. Then cement was costing a few hundred naira, and diesel was less than 100 naira a liter. Today, that $42.4 million will be equivalent of about 63.5 billion. For you to put that state on the same level, comparatively, when it was receiving 5 billion, it needs to be receiving about 63.5 billion today. But that state is receiving barely about 10. Yes, it has doubled in naira term, but then it buys cement. It has to build roads and bridges, build schools and so on, and buy cement a few thousand per bag, and buy bitumen and so on, and buy diesel at 1,600, 1,700 and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, the same argument goes in circles. Even the governments themselves also spend money. I mean, they also incur in rising costs. So, even if you give that state not 10, but you give it 20, you give it 30, you give it 40, you give it 50 billion, it's still receiving less than what it received more than a decade ago, in real terms, either in dollar terms or in purchasing power terms. This point has to be made and understood. We are talking trillions and trillions, but what value can they provide? I think in budget, you will help us answer that. Thank you very much. You are doing an amazing job there anyway. I appreciate it. As a person, for example, I deeply feel the pains of Nigerians at these challenging times, especially the over 100 million Nigerians who are multidimensionally poor. Times are hard. Sometimes I just wish that I can give every resident of Anambra maybe ₦1 million each, who can bring money and give everybody at least $1 million each to ameliorate the hardship that we have. But the reality is that if we get our entire revenue in a month, both from FAC and from our IGR, and we put it on the table and call all our estimated 8.5 million residents and share it, nobody will get up to 2,500 naira. If we brought our entire earnings and share, nobody will get more than 2,000. In fact, if it is even up to 2,000. That we did the computation with the match receipt at my executive council, and the share for each person was 1,100 and something naira. But it is from there that I will still have to pay salaries, gratuities, and pensions, build the roads and bridges, invest in health and education, invest in security, tackle menacing erosion, etc. We recently recruited additional 8,115 teachers and over 1,000 medical personnel, and these people also need to be paid, and so on. It is from that same less than 2,500 per person per month that we're expected to do this. So, in summary, my dear brothers and sisters, Nigeria faces stringent fiscal quagmire and even technical solvency challenges. Tax revenue is one of the lowest in the world. Debt has spiked to a level that leaves little headroom for more borrowing, albeit at very high cost. Yet the needs of the citizens keep increasing in geometric proportions by the day. At the extreme, the federal government, for example, can resort to the easy way out by printing more money. Yes, it's very easy. If we want everybody to be paid 1 million, it's easy. Central bank credit everybody's account with 1 million. But then after 1 week or two, a bottle of Coke might be costing 1 million naira. So, state governments or subnationals cannot. If the federal government resorts to that, then every citizen suffers collateral damages in terms of spiraling inflation, exchange rate depreciation, rising interest rates, and so on. And I want to suggest, my fellow citizens, that whether and how we finally confront and address this decade-long fiscal and structural crisis will be critical for the road ahead. Because we're in a bind, but we must get out of it. And let me make this point. I mean, I'll just share, like I said, I wasn't going to be doing a treatise on the way forward, how we're going to diversify the economy or deal with the exchange rate or deal with this. I mean, I can share those privately with the officials concerned. But I would just share a few nuggets of what I think we might, as part of the citizen conversation, like Speaker Dogara, let me throw in a few. But before I do that, I will make a few statements that won't be nice to many ears. The first, I said this won't sound nice to some ears, but it needs to be stated. President Tinubu did not cause the problem. It took more than 10 years of living in denial and kicking the cans down the road to get to this predictable sorry state. We are now suffering the consequences of what I call delayed and misguided adjustments. From a macroeconomic standpoint, the economy that President Tinubu inherited was akin to a dead horse, but standing. But he has the historic duty to mobilize Nigeria to clean up the mess for future generations. There is an emergency, and the incremental changes won't cut it. Intentional disruptions, systemic disruptions are urgently needed, but it requires mass mobilization and ownership by the public. And again, I come down to ownership. But from the tone of public conversation, it does not seem that Nigerians are informed about the magnitude of the crisis or prepared to join the solution wagon. The greatest threat I see is the conflict between the pressure for short-term populism for electoral purposes versus the medium to long-term disruptions required for sustainable transformation. That's the threat that I see. It is the conflict between pressures to be a good politician to win elections versus the demands for statesmanship for the next generations. And that's why sometimes these conversations about single term might begin to make some sense. So that you fix it, whether you say 4 years or 5 years or 6 years or 7 years single. So you come, you're not thinking about the next election. Once you finish getting into this, I faced that all the day in my state. You want to get on, they say, no, wait, you know you have an election. I said, no, let's get it. If we get there, if we lose, we lose. But we've got to get it done today. When are we ever going to stop facing the election? No, I think, and to be honest, the foundation for this house is cracked deeply. And the options for papering over the cracks are very few. In my 2005 democracy lecture, I argued, quote, that we now need 3 things to happen. Get the economics, the politics, and the law/institutions right, and then trust in God to give us the right people and the courage to implement the agenda. End of quote. That's what I said in 2005. And I elaborated on them. I was governor of Central Bank then, and I delivered that democracy lecture. It was aired live. The president was sitting next to me, and it's so saddening to me that many of the things, almost everything we said there, still very relevant. We won't get into this. But I want to say that fixing the systemic insecurity, the broken public finance and the economy, broken oil and gas sector, the infrastructure and environmental decay, the rising social tensions, and restoring hope and confidence of the citizens will require us to try several roads not traveled. Thinking and acting without any box at all. This one is not outside of inside. It will be traveling without any box. But I believe that President Tinubu, the man who fought the federal government of Nigeria to a standstill over the power of Lagos State to design the local government system of his choice, and I see the person sitting here, he was, I think he knows 1 or 2 things about what they did. Championed the fundamentals of true federalism, especially when we were there 2003 to 2007, and tamed the Atlantic, has the knowledge and courage to mobilize Nigeria to cross over the current crossroads. There are no easy or quick fixes, and he needs our collective support. And literally every sector requires a declaration of an emergency. We need working groups on security, on economy, oil and gas and natural resources, food security, etc. But there are 2 others I will just make a few statements about here that will shape the future. Number 1 of them is the devolution and building the foundations of a competitive and workable federation. And the second is a social contract with citizens to give everyone a stake in the future of Nigeria. And let me just, on this too. On devolving and building the foundations of a federation, ladies and gentlemen, we've just gone back to our national anthem, old one. It might just be a pointer that our future is in our past. That our future is in our past. This is a country that celebrates its past and not our future. So, the road to that future might actually be in our past. Our founding fathers negotiated competitive federalism as the appropriate framework for Nigeria. And since the military incursion, we have tried hard to develop with a unitary federalism and still moving in circles. It is an oxymoron to repeat the same thing and expect a different result. At my last appearance at this platform, I argued that Nigeria, quote, can't build a 100-story building on the foundation of a rickety bungalow, end of quote. For years now, discussions around restructuring, devolution through federalism have refused to go away. Almost all the socio-political groups, Afenifere, Ohaneze Ndị Igbo, Pandev, Middle Belt Forum, agree that there is no sustainable future without addressing the issue of Nigeria's structure. The Patriots recently reaffirmed the same stand. The APC, in its 2015 manifesto, identified the obtuse and inefficient Abuja as a constraint and promised to, quote, restructure Nigeria. Consequently, the same APC set up a committee on restructuring with far-reaching proposals on fiscal federalism, state police, and they even proposed the scrapping of local government system from the Constitution, since, according to the APC, no federation has 3 federating units. Funny enough, more recently, some people are arguing for autonomy of local government, including some APC persons, which will take Nigeria back many decades from what a true federation is about. There is no federal government, no federal system in the world where you have 3 federating units, where the counties in America where we copied this, or their local government go to the center to go and collect money directly, and so on and so forth. Each state must have the power to design the kind of local government system that it wants. That's what true federalism is all about. We have tried to transform Nigeria from Abuja and it has not worked. Let us try the radical devolution of powers and resources to the base and promote cooperative competition and see how far we go. We need to tinker with the fiscal powers of the federal and state governments, devolve much of the responsibilities under the exclusive list to the states, and at about 60 to 65% of the revenue to the states, of course, with each deciding on the appropriate local system to adopt. Why not consolidate the National Assembly into one with no more than 5 representatives per state? We don't need, in my view, we don't need a National Assembly costing over 300 billion a year now for this year thing to maintain. We don't need it. But what is delaying action? A friend of mine recently joked that everyone is a federalist until he or she gets to the center. Well, some of us have been unrepentant federalists before, during, and after holding offices. And I just talked about my 2005 Democracy Day lecture, where I espoused and still believe that Nigeria now has an opportunity with APC, which espoused federalism in its constitution, just like my own political party, the All Progressive Grand Alliance, talked about true federalism, controlling both the federal government and most of the other states. Truth be told, the road to a new and sustainable Nigeria begins with bold and historic actions on building this competitive and compassionate federal system. Otherwise, we will continue to move in circles. Second bit I say, and I close, the big tent and inclusive social agenda. This must be akin to the combination of American New Deal by President Franklin Roosevelt, 1933 to 38, or the Great Society programs of President Lyndon Johnson, 1965 to 67, and the European Recovery Plan, or what is popularly called the Marshall Plan, after the World War II. This will require a fundamental reordering of national priorities to invest massively in the social programs, especially health, education, and social protections, as well as infrastructure to give everyone a stake in the national cake, thereby securing the future. Chapter 2, that's the point that Bishop Kuka made. Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution on the Directive Principles of State Policy provides a template. It is time to seriously work out a national agenda to make that Chapter 2 of the Constitution justiciable of sort. I am an Awoist and a true progressive on this front. In Anambra, for example, our truly free education has raised school enrollment by about 18.7%, and out-of-school children, now the lowest in Nigeria, out of the 36 states plus FCT. Our free antenatal and free delivery services, including free CS operations for pregnant women in all government health facilities, has seen more than 60,000 beneficiaries with near zero mortality. So, if there was one thing that the military regime spent the oil boom money in the early 70s and 80s well, it was investment in qualitative education, and many of us were beneficiaries. For that roadside pepper seller or hawker, even if we can't do anything to improve her condition, we must ensure that her children don't end up like her. We must have that social agenda. That's what my party espouses. We'll build all the bridges, we'll build all the roads, we'll build the infrastructure. They say we're building the quality that our state hasn't seen before, and even completing more than 10 kilometers every month. Yes, we can have all of those and build all of those. But if we don't invest in the human beings, that's the bridge to the future. And this democracy will not survive unless we have sufficient people with sufficient stake in its survival. So, for me, that's how we build the big tent for everyone and a truly inclusive society. It is the greatest way to break the dynasties of poverty and inequality and groom future stakeholders in the Nigerian project. Without this, soon the rich won't be able to sleep or walk the streets because the poor and the excluded are hungry and angry. The resources we generate from the emergency turnaround in oil and gas sector, as well as more tax revenues, must be reinvested in the people and the infrastructure as the road to the future. And then I think about the social re-engineering. Fellow Nigerians, I think part of the challenge we have, and I will say this, is that as leaders, I don't think we're talking straight with Nigerians. I think like a family with broken finance, the father shouldn't continue to pretend I'm the big guy and all of that, and bring it clean. Father, mother, bring these children, they are now adults. Instead of one going back to school and writing you, they need 300,000. The other one writing you, need 400,000. Yes, all their needs are justified. But your combined salary is maybe 200,000. Call them to a meeting, put it on the table. Let's have a conversation. We have not been able, I think we need to come clean to Nigerians, but we need a bigger agenda. And that is a lifestyle embodied and exhibited by those of us in public authorities must also reflect the conditions of the time. And that is why I propose reinventing MAMSA and the new Code of Conduct for Public Officers. Let's come clean and straight with Nigerians. Nigeria is very poor and broke. But the lifestyle of governments and government officials don't show it, especially with the obscene flamboyance in public display. A time of socio-economic strife is not a good time to be in public office. The poor are hungry and impatient, and let's not annoy them more with our insensitivity. For the federal government, the actual projected revenue comes to about 6,160 per Nigerian per month. For the states, except Lagos, for Lagos and a few states, most states have revenues amounting to less than 3,000 naira per resident per month. It is from these paltry shares per citizen that we're expected to provide all the infrastructure, debt service, pay salaries and pensions, build schools, provide everything and so on. Thus, for each of our wasteful spending, let's be conscious about the fact how many citizens' share we are squandering. Once we lose this consciousness about the public trust we bear, the society dies irredeemably. We are not expecting our public officials to be saints or are there saints anywhere in the world. But it suffices for us never to lose empathy for the poor and always conscious of the resources, that the resources entrusted with us is their money, not ours. Just that sensitivity is an important beginning, and we must be seen to embody the change that we preach. A new code of conduct is required for public officials, some signaling is required. And perhaps government officials should maybe, and there are many ways we can signal this. Maybe we should mandatorily go back to the equivalent of, a secured equivalent of the Peugeot 504 of the Morotala Mohammed days. Yes, in this case, I agree with my, one of Reverend Fathers, Reverend Father Mbaka. When I just read a few days, he was saying that public officials should also, elected governors and so on, should also earn minimum salary, minimum wage. I agree that we should be paid that so we can feel that as well. In Anambra, I have not received a cover of salary since I assumed office. I've donated my salary to the state. Just is symbolic. It's not much. The salary of the governor is 673,000. When I came and they showed it to me, I said, this is my salary. The system is in denial, actually. That's my salary. I said, yes. But the tax I paid to the state the previous year, if you annualize what I'm to be paid as governor, what I paid to the state as tax the previous year was more than twice the amount they're now going to pay me as salary. I said, now keep your money. We can do without it. I think generally the system is in denial. But there must be some signaling. It's just the symbolism of this. We need to reinvent something akin to the mass mobilization for self-reliance, social justice, and economic recovery, MAMSA, of the Babangida days, and a new code of conduct for public officials. Both government officials and other citizens need to be constantly reminded of our respective sacred citizen civic duties and obligations, as well as the accountability requirements. We need to break the transactional bargain between politicians and voters that has become a debilitating circus. We all complain about corruption, but clap and bless the same public officials when they make public display of the process of corruption. Why the one who does not do so is considered, quote, wicked, or not generous, or even useless. In some sense, the citizens expect and even demand of public officials to be corrupt. And those who behave otherwise are considered either insane or stupid. Let's have this frank national conversation, because we all seem to be culpable. But we must break this cycle to make sustainable progress. We must rebuild a sense of nationalism and patriotism and reinvent the old slogan of black and proud. Let's mainstream pride in everything Nigerian. Let's drive only made in Nigeria vehicles and wear only made in Nigeria fabrics. Eat only made in Nigeria food and drink only made in Nigeria drinks. That's what we do in Anambra State. So when you see me wearing this Akwete fabric, handmade by the women of Akwete of Abia State, or wearing the eagle on my cap here, that is a Nigerian coat of arms, the eagle on Nigerian coat of arms, or driving a innocent vehicle as my official car, and so on and so forth. I am proudly advertising that, quote, I am Nigerian and proud. If all of us wear only Nigerian fabrics, if all of us wear only Nigerian fabrics, I can bet you the textile industry in Nigeria will create more than 10 million new jobs. Let's start from there. I'm sending the message that all of us have something to contribute to fix this country. So, we must intentionally build a sense of nation, not just a slogan, but an attitude. In Anambra, when we assumed office, we stopped this excellency business. So don't excellency me. Call me Mr. Governor. I leave all this, because sometimes we take this title to become achievement. The Nigeria is the only place where somebody puts a poster. He wants to contest for Senate. They start at distinguished. He's already distinguished. He hasn't even gotten there. Yeah. And somebody print a complimentary card and give you, and they write Your Excellency, the former gubernatorial aspirant of... So in Anambra, we say, leave this Excellency, I'm Mr. Governor, and I have Mr. Commissioners, no Honorable, no Excellency, no this, and so on and so forth. I think part of it is in the conversation. These things might be symbolic, may not be much, but symbolisms can become very important in shaping narratives. So, all I say is that in Anambra, yes, we recruited about 18,000 teachers. On merit, we must mainstream merit-based recruitment in our public sector in Nigeria. Yes, Bishop Kuka mentioned about building the public service. But you can't build that if we're doing this, a little, balancing, and then we don't recruit the best. In Anambra recently, we recruited 8,115 teachers and little over 1,000 medical professionals, strictly on merit. And our teachers crisscross about 18 states of Nigeria. Our teachers are drawn from 18 states of Nigeria. It's not about where you come from. What is the interest of the Anambra child? The interest of the Anambra child is to be taught by the best teacher in the world, not by the mediocre teacher from his village. That's what we must begin to program as a people, so to speak. And we appointed permanent secretaries, and we have people from both Abia, Oshun, and so on in our civil service, because they are the best that we could find, so to speak. So we must drastically reduce the cost of governance. In Anambra, for example, doing more with less is our slogan. Extreme prudence is the reason we are delivering historic results on infrastructure and all other sectors and still refuse to borrow a kobo in over 2 years. The State Assembly approved for us to borrow 100 billion 2 years ago. And as we speak, we're still insisting that if we are going to borrow in the future, we will only borrow for projects that will have capacity to pay back. We have spent the first 2 years restructuring our public finance on a path of sustainability, and I think budgeted. I saw your last thing on sustainability of the states, and Anambra happened to be in the top 5 today. Thank you very much, so to speak. So, our budget is restructured to about now 23% on recurrent, while 77% for capital. We have cost of governance to bare bones. For example, it used to cost about 137 million a month just to clean offices and so on and so forth. We've cut it down to 11 million a month. That's what it is. We have no office of First Lady, and there is no appropriation for that. My wife drives my personal vehicles that I came into office with. And we don't do this to impress anyone, but out of personal conviction and knowledge that Anambra cannot afford the West. Currently, as I said, Anambra is ranked among your top 5 on fiscal sustainability. Our target is that and we'll probably achieve it sooner than later, our IGR should be able to pay for all our recurrent expenditures, while any penny we receive from Abuja will be devoted to investing on the future of the people. In sum, we must reorder our priorities if we must maximize values for our people, given, again, the point I made before that the resources are very little, very little. We must cut the fat, cut them off. So somebody comes to me and says, give us an appointment. And to be appointment for what? Give me SA or SSA. And I say, what will you be doing? What will you be doing for Anambra people? If I give you SA, you say, no, anything. And I say, no. If I appoint you SA or SSA and there is nothing, no desk, no value that you'll be producing. If I call 20 Keke Napep drivers and put them in front of you and tell them and ask you to tell them what you will be doing for Anambra, such that at the end of the month they will contribute all that they pay as their own payment will be used to pay to you as SA. Will you be able to stand before them and give them that value proposition? No. We can't circle ourselves in the capital and not think that this resource that we spend is the resource that belongs to all the citizens. When we receive our FAC, when we receive anything, it is money belonging to the 8.5 million residents of Anambra, not to the little circle that are in government. And so that's why I think that all these values and the things that we need a new MAMSA to begin to, in addition to broad civic duties, that the new MAMSA will help us to mainstream. And if I may conclude, I conclude where I started. And that is that these things about democracy and free market are threatened by our challenging economy. We must break out somewhere. That agenda is in a different venue to discuss. What will be the breakout points that over the short to medium term we can break out of this circle? It's a vicious circle. We are trapped. Low revenue, low government spending, low outcomes. But you need a quantum injection into the system to move, and you have little leg room again to borrow. I'm talking about the federal government particularly. Very little leg room, because your debt service payment now is more in excess of 50% of your recurrent expenditure, of your revenue. So if you can't, and you will not print money, we've got to think out of the box now. Where will that growth handle come from? And like I said, this is not a conversation here. As President Clinton once said, it's the economy stupid. How can we sustain democracy over the next 25 years? That in about 2050, we're expecting 440 million Nigerians. Not 2023, not 30 million. Are we going to be able to sustain it? I'm an incredible optimist in the potential greatness of this blessed country. That's essentially why I have persisted in public service and applied for my current job. I believe in the infinite possibilities and opportunities that Nigeria presents. Our youthful population, if unleashed, will definitely conquer the world, and the 21st century will be Nigeria's century. But building that next Nigeria will require a very determined and strong pull, very determined pull by all Nigerians. It is good to complain, but better to do something positive about it. We must turn our current challenges into opportunities. As I ponder the lamentations and the possibilities, and even as I was coming out here, that was a song ringing in my head. I just recalled that song by Sonny Okosun. Some of you old enough remember that about 40 years ago, when Nigeria was barely 24 years of independence, the late Sonny Okosun sang a song of lamentations and hope. In that song, he had lamentations, but he also provided hope that only through our collective action can we then build. It was a call also to collective action. In that song, which way Nigeria? You remember that? Which way Nigeria? I love my fatherland. I want to know which way Nigeria is heading to. Many years after independence, we still find it hard to start. How long shall we be patient till we'll get to the promised land? Oh yeah. Let's save Nigeria so Nigeria won't die. Thank you very much, and God bless you.